guys, welcome to this week's video. Today I'm going to be making this white stag commission. It's got a little bit of moss on the antlers, and it's also got some removable tree stuff. So they go on top of the antlers, and so it'll sort of look something like that. Yeah, so this was a commission, and I will go through how I made it in today's video. In the meantime, you can check out my shop at creaturesofnat.com, and I have some more stags that are available for adoption on there, and a couple of other little critters and some artwork on there, so that's at creaturesofnat.com. You can also check me out on my social media at Creatures of Nat on Facebook and Instagram. And yes, so if you want to see how I made this, then just stay tuned. Okay, so I'm starting off with a resin cast that I have sculpted, molded in silicone, and then cast in resin. I've kept the antlers separate because I use these plastic antlers that are pretty hard to break, so if I was to sculpt all of the antlers, they're kind of a bit more fragile, so this way is a lot lighter and a lot cheaper too. And I'm attaching those antlers using some epoxy sculpt, so it's a two-part epoxy that you have to mix together. Always wear gloves when mixing this. It says it on the little instructions to mix it with some gloves. And then you mix it till it's a smooth consistency and it doesn't have any marbling in it. That way you know it's mixed, and it will set within 24 hours. So what I do is I like to put a little ring around the area that I'm attaching it to. That way it will adhere properly. And then I just sort of sculpt it out and smooth it into the details of the horns so it looks like it was meant to be there. So then I leave that to dry overnight before I move on to anything else, just in case I knock it and it comes out. And then I move on to painting the bits that need to be painted. So I usually paint around the eyes, the nose, and the mouth. So this one I'm painting just in black paint. It's black acrylic paint from the brand Chromacryl. And I'm just painting around the eyes and the nose and the mouth all in a black colour. But you can use any acrylic paint that you can get your hands on. You don't need to use this specific brand, so whatever's available in your craft store. And I do like to prime my resin pieces before I add any paint to it. I have a primer video on my channel that you can check out if you want to know what primers I use. Yeah, so you can check that out. And acrylic paint is really quick to dry anyway, so it's usually dry in like 10 minutes, so I can move on to the next thing pretty quickly, whereas, you know, other sorts of paints takes a little bit longer to actually dry. And the same deal with these antlers. So I chose to I've got black and white antlers, but this time I chose to use the black ones just because it already had a darker base coat. So I'm using a brown color to paint the antlers like a solid brown, and I just thought it would be easier and less streaking if I just went for the black undertoned antlers. So this one I didn't prime it because sometimes it doesn't really need it, but I'm using a raw umber, I think it is, paint by the same brand in Chromacryl, and I applied quite a few coats of paint on this just to make sure I get a nice even coat, and then I'll seal it with a seal from Liquitex. And the same deal with the hooves here. So something I have sculpted, molded, and cast in resin, and this particular doll has a plastic ball and socket armature. I have a lot of questions about the armatures, which I'll touch on a little later in the video, but the same deal, using the same black paint as the face from Chromacryl, and just applying a few layers of paint onto that hoof. Moving on to the fur, and it's my stock standard white fur that I use a lot, so the customer wanted a fully white stag, so I drew out all of the patterns onto the fabric, and I'm cutting it out with a small pair of sharp scissors. And I like to use these small scissors for cutting little areas like this, just because I have better control, and I find the blade gets in between the pile a lot easier than actually bigger scissors, or even using a Stanley knife. I find that sort of tears the backing a little bit too much, and then I just don't like the way it cuts. I much prefer to use some scissors. So, but whatever works for you, just give it a try. Whatever you like, it's what you like. So yeah, just give it a try. And I usually make all of my patterns from scratch. I have a few questions about patterning. I'm not sure if I am going to sell the patterns or not. I'm not really confident enough to sell my patterns, so I probably won't. Maybe for a Patreon level or something, I don't know. Something, I haven't really given it that much thought because I never really considered it, but I've had quite a few people ask, so I'll see. So once all of the pieces are cut out, I pin the pattern first side together, and then I'll go ahead and sew it up on the sewing machine. And I prefer to use the sewing machine just because it's a lot quicker and it's a lot stronger. When you stitch things, it's harder to pull apart than hand sewing things, and yeah, I just prefer to use a machine. And this is what we have after I've sewn all of the parts up. So I leave the legs open so I can feed them back through, and I also leave the rear end open so I can pull it the right way around, and also the head area because that's going to be attached to the resin piece. But you will have to do some hand sewing once you put everything together and put the armature in anyway. So I'm going to go ahead and pull it the right way around, and I just like to grab the neck area and just pull it through, and then I can just feed the legs through pretty easily. Depending how big the hole is, you need to leave a fair bit of a hole for the legs to go through. And this is what we have once it's been pulled through. So it looks like a bit of a mess at the moment, but you can see how the legs are open and the back end is open. So I can go ahead and prepare all the armature and insert it into the body, and then add any of the polyfill. So for this one, I am using the ball and socket armature, like I said before, rather than a wire armature. But I do have a wire armature tutorial in my shop at creaturesofnat.com if you want to know or learn how I make my wire armatures. But with the ball and socket armatures, they're a bit easier to construct, and a little bit quicker because you don't have to wait for things to dry. So I just measure out against the body what size I want. So I can actually do a video, like its own separate video on this if you are interested. I do plan on doing a big restock of these armatures, maybe late July or late August. I don't know, but I'll let everyone know when I do have a restock, because I get quite a few people asking if they can get some of the armature. So I'll just let everyone know when I get them in stock. Alright, so once the armature's in, I go ahead and sew all of the ends up using a ladder stitch. I also have a video on my channel on how to do a ladder stitch for faux fur. And then I go ahead and attach the faux fur pieces to the resin using a tacky fabric glue. And I get this one from a local store here in Australia called Spotlight, but you can find something in your local craft stores that will do the same job, just a tacky fabric glue. Once it's done, I go ahead and apply all of the fur to the resin head, and then once I've done that, I'll go ahead and add any little details that need to be added, so just like a touch up around the eyes, the nose and the mouth, or any patterning that I'm going to have, or markings. I go ahead and add in various different ways using different mediums. I have a couple of videos of what mediums I use as well, but sometimes it's fabric markers, it's fabric paints, it's just normal paint, it could be anything. And then attaching the faux moss onto the antlers. So I didn't want to go overboard with the moss on the antlers, just because I'm going to be adding some of those fake branches. So I wanted it to be sort of a little bit more minimal when the branches aren't on there, just little hints of moss on the antlers. So sticking it on using that tacky fabric glue as well, and that works really well. And this is what we have once I have finished everything. I really enjoy doing these stags. They are my biggest creature. So yeah, if you're interested in a commission, feel free to message me through my shop or my Facebook or my Instagram, whatever works for you, and I can get back to you with some prices. And that is it for me today, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe. If you have any video requests, you can leave it in the comments down below. You can also check me out on Instagram and Facebook at Creatures of Fanat, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye!